That's so funny. I mean, that's so mysterious.
It is so fucking hot. Can we turn the AC on? How are you even wearing a blazer right now?
Oh, this one's my summer blazer. Anyway, I'll turn on the AC when I'm done reading, okay?
Fine.
What are you reading? You know, just a classic Agatha Christie novel. My favorite.
Okay, yeah, I see that, but what do you have behind it?
Okay, fine, you got me. I'm reading a smut manga.
No, the thing that is clearly sticking out of your book.
Oh, this one? It's my bookmark. Okay, I was gonna play along with whatever game we're playing right now, but now I'm very curious.
Okay, fine, I admit it. I was reading Boys Over Flowers. Everyone judges people for liking or reading it, but this is my guilty pleasure manga. It's addicting, and I can't stop myself. Boys Over Flowers is literally the best-selling manga in Japan. You don't have to hide that you're reading it. But if I get caught with it, they'll find me.
They? Who's they?
Hey! How did you even get in here? Don't pigs have to follow vampire rules or something?
Yeah, you better run. And why don't you tell your little friends that Colleen sent you? Don't worry, game show host, I'm gonna make sure those goons don't bother you for a long time. Boys Over Flowers has been a pretty infamous series over countless fandoms at this point. What started as a manga has now become a near inescapable cultural sensation across most of Asia, spawning an anime adaptation, tens of different dramas from China all the way to America, a DS game, and even a boy band. This manga has become the best-selling shoujo manga ever, selling over 61 million copies in 2022, and has inspired so many of your favorite manga going forward. Clearly, Boys Over Flowers is a beloved series with just how many people bought into this shoujo phenomenon. Yet, if you ask basically anyone now whether or not they like this series, you're more than likely to get just a very dumbfounded look. Boys Over Flowers, in some ways, has basically become the butt of a joke for many drama fans and manga fans alike. Whether citing the problematic aspects or the toxic aspects from the series, or just saying they're tired of the trope of a poor girl entering a rich school and getting a harem. The series is nothing more than a guilty pleasure reality show viewing for some, or one of the worst manga to ever be created to others. I knew of this series' notoriety for years now, but have mostly avoided it myself because I knew so many people didn't like it. Sure, the reviews on some review sites initially look good, but then you scroll down just a little bit and you'll see more one-star reviews than anything else. So when I say I was shocked when I first read it and had an absolute blast, I mean it. It was campy and fun, introducing insane soap opera levels of drama, but still serious and thoughtful when it needed to pull back. For a manga that ran 37 volumes, you would think at one point you might get bored of it, but for me, that never happened. I found nearly every minute of this manga entertaining. In some ways, though, I can't help but agree with a lot of sentiments about this manga. There are very clear flaws that date the series to being written in the early 90s. But in other ways, I do think a lot of people don't give credit where it's due for why this series was so popular to begin with. A manga with 61 million copies sold shouldn't just be dismissed as something without any inherent value. And Boys Over Flowers, despite its flaws, still has a lot of hot-button topics and tropes that are ever relevant to the youth even today. Not to mention, many of the tropes that we are tired of now, we wouldn't even have in the first place if Boys Over Flowers wasn't created. For those who don't know, Boys Over Flowers Flowers is a shoujo manga that was created by Yoko Kamio in 1992. The series follows a poor girl named Tsukushi who finds herself going to an elite academy called Eitoku. The school is known for being the home of the F4, or the Flowery Four, a group of the world's richest conglomerate sons who are both handsome and feared at the school. While trying to remain innocuous to her fellow rich kid classmates, Tsukushi tries not to incur their wrath. But one day, when she stands up to the group head Domyoji, Tsukushi becomes their next target of bullying, harassment, assault, rumors, and ostracization. Until finally, Tsukushi can't take it anymore after a particularly horrific incident, and she kicks Domyoji right across the face, declaring war against him and his jolly band of goons. Despite getting his ass beat like a drum, Domyoji forms a crush on Tsukushi and begins vying for her affection through more bullying. Tsukushi's proximity to the F4 only brings her more trouble though, as others' jealousy over the attention she gets just adds fuel to the constantly burning fire of Tsukushi's life, as she juggles part-time jobs, familial troubles, money, extravagant celebrity parties, nightlife, and the childish crush of Domyoji. When we talk about the legacy of something, we have to understand the time period in which it was created. In that regard, it's incredibly important to mention that Boys Over Flowers was made in the early 90s as a response to the economic bubble burst that happened in Japan. Only a few years prior to this manga's release, Japan was in its rich bitch era, with copious amounts of spending on designer goods and luxury items. That is until the stocks crashed because of bad lending practices in real estate, which ended up tanking the once dominant salaryman job. Thus, teens suddenly had less allowances to spend on more frivolous items, and the country started to frame these teens as being shallow. Think in regards to the gyaru. In addition to the economic bubble burst, tensions were also high amongst teens because of reports of school bullying sweeping the nation. This type of bullying wasn't just calling Rachel a loser and excluding her from the Foursquare game. It's closer to if you beat up Rachel so bad she lost her eyesight. Or it would be like if your teacher got involved for staging a mock funeral for Rachel. Both of which are actual cases of bullying that happened in the late 80s and early 90s. These types of cases were making headlines in Japan at the time and should have been more aptly titled as assault. With these two pressure cookers happening in the background of Boys Over Flowers, it's no surprise that this manga resonated with as many youth as it did. Tsukushi is a much needed character for any young boy or girl to look up to if they want to be brave and stand up to the bullies at their school. Not just because of her bravery, but also because Tsukushi starts off as a passive bystander to the bullying of the F4. Having her start in this position and then gain her bravery shows that anyone, even those who think that they have to stay out of it, can make a change. Giving the snarky rich boy that no one can touch, not even the teachers, a kick to the head is just a tiny little cherry on top of comeuppance. It's not hard to see why this narrative would be cathartic for a lot of kids who were either dealing with bullying or seeing bullying at their school at the time. However, what really makes this manga special is the portrayal of class disparities and the everyday lives of either middle class or lower citizens. It highlights the huge gap between these two groups, not just in apparel or furniture or what kind of handbags they have. It extends far beyond that by showing the power and opulence the 1% can wield against those that they deem below them. At one point, Domyoji tries to buy Tsukushi off with beauty treatments and fancy clothing, trying to get her to dismiss everything he had done previously to her by saying, "I'll let you live in luxury." So when Tsukushi doesn't play along with him, he doesn't understand why someone would deny this offer. He has no idea how to deal with a person without throwing money at them, yelling at her who she thinks she is without brand names. To which Tsukushi remarks, "She isn't a name brand. she's just her. Tsukushi's whole family situation is also just living proof of the huge crater the economic bubble burst had left. She lives in a small home, barely big enough for her 4 family members to live in. Her mother is very frugal, trying to save money in any way that she can, while her dad is at a dead-end job and barely making enough money to scrape by, forcing Tsukushi to become more responsible for her family at such a young age. This is also shown by how her family would almost sell her off to the Domyoji family if it meant they could get even a fraction of money. She is constantly living under the weight of capitalism and is always surrounded by people who look down on her just because she wasn't born into riches. This might be controversial, but I think there are several ways in which Boys Over Flowers could be compared to Parasite. Just on the surface level, the Makino family is a very poor family in a horrible living situation who are trying to rise their way to the top by any means necessary, but continue to get pushed down by those above them. As Tsukushi gets more and more involved with the Domyoji family, her family and friends end up getting weaved into the power-hungry oligarchy. One example of this is later in the manga when Domyoji's mother becomes more of the main antagonist, and she threatens Tsukushi's livelihood by trying to affect those around her. His mother ends up making Tsukushi's friend's dad lose his job by buying out his company, and also tries to buy off Tsukushi's silence by giving her a suitcase full of cash, showing just how much money is more valued than humanity to the richest of the rich. If you still think that maybe I'm reading into this manga a little too much, then look no further than the name of the series. The narrative and the theme of Boys Over Flowers is in that name itself. While the English localization is Boys Over Flowers, the original Japanese name is Hanayori Dango, an idiom in Japan that comes from popular flower viewings where food stalls will usually sell dango. Dango over flowers means that you value substance over style. In other words, designer handbags aren't everything if they're just for style and not for function. While I was doing the manga cutout editing for this video, I also realized that anytime major wealth was shown on the page, flowers would decorate the backgrounds or the borders, which really goes to show how much the title really plays into the theme of this series. The manga doesn't just show the cold, harsh realities of the world, though. It also shows a fantastical fairy tale version, too. I don't think it would be very shocking to anyone if I said that Boys Over Flowers is kind of a modern retelling of Cinderella, throwing a poor girl who's just looking for a little bit of fun or normalcy in her life into the world of the rich and famous, where she gets to experience just that. A big part of the reason this manga is so popular is because of just how universal the story of Cinderella can be. You're viewing something that you wish you could experience yourself and would otherwise never have the opportunity to. Why else would people be so obsessed with the Kardashians and their opulence for years now?
Diamond earring came up in the ocean and it's gone. And there's people that are dying.
It's a form of escapism where you wish you could be whisked away, never to have to worry about finances or where your next paycheck is going to come from. Any teen could relate to this, and especially ones that are dealing with money troubles in their everyday life. This series has remained relevant for over 30 years now because these are all things that kids these days are still dealing with. Kids are still dealing with bullying, now more than ever with social media being in the hands of grade schoolers, as well as the continuing dissolution of the middle class. The difference between a low-wage salaryman and that of a CEO's son has grown even bigger. Kids are both wishing for an out while also wishing to see someone who could stand up to those in charge for a change. Tsukushi is really just that symbol of a wild weed that we all want to be. This is how Boys Over Flowers got so popular. It came at just the right time, had just the right amount of drama and romance to keep people invested, and had cross-cultural appeal. Every country has teens, and every teen deals with bullying and the desire to escape. That's why the drama adaptations were just as popular as the manga in Japan, and they were a huge driving force for the cultural impact this manga had. The drama adaptations in Taiwan, South Korea, Indonesia, and so many other places launched so many different celebrities' careers and idols too. It was also partially responsible for why there was a second Hallyu wave in South Korea. This manga's popularity also ended up creating a bunch of knockoffs, spin-offs, and parodies. There were a plethora of shoujo manga in the 90s trying to replicate that Cinderella magic of Boys Over Flowers. They had the main male lead be an egotistical rich boy, and the girl a stubborn and rebellious one. Picture series like Ouran High School Host Club, which is probably more of a direct parody, or you could think of a series like Maid-sama. This trope was so popular that for basically the next decade, all you would see was this trope. It wasn't until around the early 2010s that it was dethroned when a little-known manga called Kimi ni Todoke came out. Shonen manga weren't immune to the Boys Over Flowers love either. One of the most famous examples now is probably Spy Family. Without Boys Over Flowers, you would neither have Damien nor Damien and Anya. The author has directly stated that Damien's character design was basically ripped from Domyoji, and not just that, but Domyoji and Tsukushi were basically the blueprint for the entire situation around Damien and Anya. Rich boy teases poor girl at prestigious school. She retaliates and punches or kicks him in the face. He ends up falling madly in love with her immediately afterwards. When I first read Boys Over Flowers, I was incredibly shocked to see that Tatsuya Endo basically pulled everything from the first chapter and threw it into Damien and Anya. And yet you'll have some people out here saying, oh, that's a Damien Anya ripoff. No, bitch, that's a Domyoji and Tsukushi ripoff. With all that being said, I do completely understand how this manga may have fallen out of public favor, as the people who read it in their childhood have now aged up. The first and glaring issue is Domyoji as a character. While I did find myself enjoying him while I was reading it, it is also a little hard to put out of your mind that if he was a real person, he would be a Bush-era loving Republican. He's also a rich kid who would probably be in jail for the things that he does in this manga if he were not rich. Most importantly though, he tries to rape Tsukushi on multiple different occasions in the early parts of the manga. That's not something we should brush past, and I would in no way fault someone for not being able to continue this manga if they didn't want to. It's an extremely unfortunate trope that pops up way too often in any of our media across the world. And while I would say depiction doesn't equal endorsement, Tsukushi and Domyoji do end up together later in the manga. To my surprise, I did kind of like their coupling if I put out of my mind what happens in the early chapters. I think Tsukushi's brashness and stubbornness really clashes well with Domyoji's, and I just enjoyed seeing them go blow for blow at each other. But obviously, that doesn't negate the early abuse or Domyoji's past behavior, and especially if we put this into the circumstances of the real world. It's easy to see why so many people are put off by this manga, knowing that these two are an endgame pairing. If anything though, to Kamiyo's benefit, she did say that she wasn't planning to have Domyoji and Tsukushi ever get together in the early parts of the manga, but I think with the amount of stuff that Domyoji does at the start, they kind of just shouldn't have been able to go forward in that direction. Even with its flaws, Boys Over Flowers is just an addicting read. The reason it is one of the most beloved shoujo manga in Asia is because of the writing, the characters, and the relatability. Everyone can find some part of themselves in one of the characters, whether it be Tsukushi's vulnerability or her resilience. Maybe you even relate to Domyoji's gradual change to opening up his heart, and hopefully you don't relate to anything else with him. Decades have passed since its initial release, but the story it's laid out has been one that so many people have wanted to recreate, with new authors still trying to find fresh takes on this classic story setup. One even coming out right now in the magazine that Boys Over Flowers initially ran in. This is how much this manga has impacted pop culture overall. While the Cinderella story has been around for ages, it's the ability to make this series a touchstone for modern day teens on navigating the more harder, messier parts of their life, updating that fairy tale by adding in relevant topics like school bullying and the growing gap of the 1%. Not only is the structure familiar to kids, but the everyday life bits are too. During my first read of Boys Over Flowers a couple months ago, never did I find this manga to be overly dated. Sure, they threw in a pager at one point, and it made me giggle, but I could still feel for Sakushi, her struggles to live in a world where money is valued over capability or tenacity even. I'm 31 and that's still a struggle that I deal with, which is why I was immediately able to understand why this manga was such a chart-topping hit. You could pick up Boys Over Flowers in the 2000s or in the 2030s, and the series would feel just as realistic as the day that it first came out. This is why this manga has a lasting legacy, and this is also why I can't blame people like myself who enjoyed every bit of the journey the story takes you on.